They came from the windswept grasslands, horsemen born in the saddle, raised by the howl of the wind and hardened by the endless horizon. Long before the Mongols, before Genghis Khan was even a whisper in history, there was another power that ruled the steppes, a forgotten empire that once terrified the mightiest civilization on earth, China. They were called the Xiongnu. To the ancient Han Dynasty, they were ghosts in the mist, a nightmare that rode with thunder beneath their hooves, appearing without warning, vanishing into the plains as if swallowed by the earth itself. For centuries, the Great Wall stood not as a monument to unity or strength, but as a desperate shield against them. The story of the Xiongnu begins in the great expanse of the Eurasian steppe, a sea of grass stretching from Mongolia to Kazakhstan. It was a world without borders, where survival belonged to those who could ride, hunt, and fight. The Xiongnu were masters of that world. Their empire was not built on marble or stone, but on movement, on the rhythm of horses and the bow. To outsiders, they were savages, raiders, nomads. But to themselves, they were the heirs of the sky, chosen by Tengri, the eternal blue heaven that watched over the steppes. In the 3rd century BCE, while the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, was forging his empire behind walls of stone, something was stirring in the north. Tribes of the steppe, long fragmented, began to unite under one banner. Their leader was a man named Modu Chanyu, a name that would echo in fear across Asia. Modu was a genius of war, ruthless and cunning, a man who could read the movements of armies the way others read the clouds. His rise began with blood. Legend says he killed his own father, the tribal chief, to seize power. Those who hesitated were executed. Those who questioned him were shot with his own arrows. Only the loyal survived. And under Modu, loyalty meant obedience unto death. Modu transformed the scattered tribes into an organized war machine. He trained his riders to obey commands by whistled signals, to shoot precisely while galloping, to move as one body across the land. In a single generation, the Xiongnu went from a loose confederation to a centralized empire, the first great steppe empire in history. At their peak, they would control territory larger than Rome, stretching from the borders of Korea to the edge of Central Asia. Their power rested on the horse. A Xiongnu child learned to ride before he could walk. Their bows, crafted from horn and sinew, could pierce armor at 100 meters. Their tactics were fluid: ambush, retreat, encirclement. They fought like the wind, never where you expected, never where you were prepared. Chinese armies built for sieges and set-piece battles struggled to fight them. The Xiongnu didn't hold cities, they didn't defend walls. They moved, and when they struck with terror. By 200 BCE, the Han Dynasty had replaced the Qin, and China was rising to new power. But the shadow of the north remained. Emperor Gaozu, the founder of the Han, believed he could subdue the nomads through force. He marched north with a massive army, confident in the might of civilization. But Modu Chanyu was waiting. Near Pingcheng, Gaozu's army was trapped by the Xiongnu, encircled by cavalry on open ground, frozen by fear. For 7 days, the Emperor of China was surrounded, cut off from food, water, and hope. Only through deception and negotiation did he escape. The Han court would never forget the humiliation. From that day forward, the Chinese viewed the Xiongnu not as mere raiders, but as equals, or perhaps superiors. In the years that followed, an uneasy peace formed between them. The Han sent princesses to marry Xiongnu leaders, along with annual tributes of silk, grain, and wine, a policy known as Heqin, or peace through kinship. But beneath the diplomacy, resentment festered. The Chinese saw it as extortion. The Xiongnu saw it as proof of dominance. To the Xiongnu, taking tribute wasn't shameful. It was victory without battle. For decades, the steppe and the wall coexisted in fragile balance, their fates intertwined. The Xiongnu Empire reached its golden age during the 2nd century BCE. They built alliances with distant tribes, the Ueji, the Kangju, and others whose names echo faintly through the dust of history. Their influence stretched westward into Central Asia, where caravans from Persia and India began to cross their lands. Trade and tribute flowed like rivers. Yet power breeds division, and the Xiongnu were no exception. After Modu's death, his successors struggled to maintain unity. The vast distances of the steppe, the rival ambitions of clan leaders, and the constant temptation of rebellion began to tear at the empire's seams. Meanwhile, the Han Dynasty grew stronger. Under Emperor Wu of Han, one of China's most ambitious rulers, the balance of power began to shift. Emperor Wu was determined to end the humiliation of tribute once and for all. He reorganized his armies, fortified his frontiers, and launched a series of massive campaigns into the steppe. For the first time in centuries, the Xiongnu faced an enemy that could match their endurance. The wars between the Han and Xiongnu were brutal and costly. Chinese armies marched deep into the plains, crossing deserts and frozen mountains, often losing more men to the elements than to battle. Yet their persistence paid off. By the mid-100s BCE, the Han began to break the Xiongnu's grip. Han generals like Wei Qing and Huo Qubing, names now legendary in Chinese history, struck devastating blows. Huo Qubing's cavalry rode thousands of miles into the steppes, destroying Xiongnu camps, seizing their sacred banners, and driving them ever northward. The tide was turning, but even as their power waned, the Xiongnu did not vanish overnight. They remained a force of fear and respect. The Han built the Great Wall higher and longer, not as a boast, but as a shield. The wall wasn't built in peace. It was built in panic, stone by stone, as a defense against the riders who could appear from nowhere. Even when defeated, the Xiongnu were never truly conquered. They would retreat, regroup, and strike again. In time, the empire split into two. The southern Xiongnu, who made uneasy peace with the Han and settled closer to China, and the northern Xiongnu, who refused submission and fled further into the heart of the steppe. This division marked the beginning of the end. Internal strife, climate shifts, and pressure from new nomadic powers, such as the Jianbei, eroded what remained. By the 1st century CE, the northern Xiongnu had faded into the fog of history, but their legacy was far from gone. To the west, whispers of a new people began to emerge, fierce riders with faces and tactics eerily familiar to those who remembered the old steppe empires. They were called the Huns. Some historians believe they were the descendants of the Xiongnu, pushed ever westward by the tides of time. If true, then the same horsemen who once terrorized China would centuries later thunder across Europe's plains, bringing the fall of Rome itself. The world that began on the Mongolian steppe would end in the ashes of the Western Empire, a circle of conquest spanning continents. What made the Xiongnu so powerful was not just their warfare, it was their way of life. They were free in a way the settled world could never comprehend. No emperor ruled their hearts. No walls confined their reach. Their gods lived in the open sky. Their wealth ran on 4 legs, and their power came from unity born of hardship. To the Han chroniclers, they were barbarians. Yet even those chroniclers could not hide their awe. The Xiongnu were the mirror opposite of China. Wild where it was ordered, swift where it was slow, unpredictable where it was precise. And yet both civilizations depended on each other. The Han needed the trade, the horses, the frontier. The Xiongnu needed the silk, the grain, the goods of the south. Their rivalry shaped centuries of diplomacy, war, and myth. When the last of the Xiongnu disappeared, they left behind little trace. No marble ruins, no libraries, no temples. Their empire existed in the living memory of the land itself. Their bones lie beneath the steppe grass, unmarked and forgotten. But the echoes of their hoofbeats still linger. The Great Wall still stands, carved across the deserts and mountains, a silent reminder of the fear they inspired. Even now, archaeologists uncover remnants of their world. Gold ornaments, horse gear, arrowheads, scattered like whispers of an empire that defied history's grasp. Imagine standing on the Mongolian steppe at dusk. The sky burns with the orange glow of sunset. The wind moves through the grass like a ghostly ocean. Somewhere in the distance, you can almost hear it. The thunder of horses, the cry of warriors, the echo of a world long gone. That was the sound that terrified emperors. The Xiongnu changed the course of history not by building, but by breaking boundaries. They forced the Chinese to innovate, to fortify, to expand, to rethink what civilization meant when faced with chaos on horseback. In their own way, they forged the identity of both sides, the settled and the nomadic, the builder and the destroyer. Every stone of the Great Wall carries the memory of their name. As centuries passed, other steppe empires would rise. The Turks, the Mongols, the Tatars, each owing something to the legacy of the Xiongnu. They wrote the blueprint for empire without borders. Their vision of power was not tied to cities or walls, but to the bond between man and horse, leader and clan, heaven and earth. They understood something the civilized world often forgot: that true power lies in motion, not monuments. And yet, history forgets them. We remember the Mongols, the Romans, the Persians. But the Xiongnu, the ones who first united the steppe, who brought mighty China to its knees, have become shadows. Perhaps it's because they left no stone records, no scrolls. Perhaps it's because the victors write history, and the victors were those behind the walls. But the steppe remembers. The wind that howls across the plains carries their name still. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to the last Xiongnu. Some became part of the Han frontier, intermarrying, trading, and fading into China's borderlands. Others moved west, vanishing into the vast migrations that reshaped Eurasia. A few fragments of their language survive, scattered in ancient texts, like the final echoes of a vanished song. But if you trace the lines of history carefully, from the Xiongnu to the Huns, from the Huns to the Avars, from the Avars to the Magyars, you begin to see it, a chain of nomadic power stretching across time, linking east and west in an unbroken thread of conquest and survival. The Xiongnu's rise and fall was not just a story of empire, it was a story of the human spirit, of what happens when survival demands unity, when freedom becomes both weapon and weakness. They built nothing permanent, yet they changed everything. Their name may be forgotten by most, but their shadow lies over the world's oldest wall. A monument to fear, respect, and the eternal struggle between civilization and the wild. So the next time you see an image of the Great Wall winding through the mountains, remember this: it wasn't built to guard against myth. It was built to guard against memory. The memory of a lost empire that once ruled the wind. The Xiongnu, the riders of the endless steppe, the ones who terrified China and disappeared into history's horizon.